Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. This time's on Lair Darkness. Now Lair Darkness holds a special place in my heart simply because this is actually one of the decks that basically got me this far on YouTube at all. And honestly, yeah, this deck just made a big impact on my channel ever since I first presented it. And I figured this time around I'd just share with you guys what I came up with now. And yeah, let's go and get started. So main deck is 40 cards. So the thing about Lair Darkness is that it's sort of a trap-based deck, but it's really about tributing your opponent's monsters for cost, with Lair Darkness being on the field just to get like added value off of it. So starting off with 3 copies of Lilith, Lady of Lament. So this is literally the OG Lament monster, simply because like you can, when it's normal summon, its original attack becomes half. And also you contribute 1 Dark Monster as a quick effect, reveal 3 normal traps from your deck. Your opponent randomly picks one, and you get to set that picked card to your side of the field. And it's crazy because they don't have to be of different names. So yeah, Lilith is crazy. And plus, there are ways to get her like the full 2k attack points, like with cards like Back to the Front and all that. So like, as long as you can revive her or just special summon her in some way, yeah, it's not that hard. Next, 2 copies of Alice, Lady of Lament. This is basically your deck's extender. When this card is normal summon, you can target 1 Lady of Lament monster in your graveyard, special summon it. So yeah, this brings back Lilith. But also, you can banish 1 normal trap from your hand or your grave, special summon this card. If this card is tributed, or if this card in its owner's position is destroyed by an opponent's card, so it doesn't specify by battle or card effect, you can add 1 Fiend monster whose combined attack and defense points equals to 2,000, in which case all the Lament monsters are going to be that case. Next up, 1 copy of Malice. I know some people don't like to run Malice, but I like it because the fact that she kind of recycles your trap cards, so that's the whole reason. Plus, she does tribute 2 monsters, so like, if you want to tribute out one of your tokens and one of your opponent's monsters, yeah, you can definitely do that with Malice. But yeah, again, it's just good for utility. And last of the Lament monsters, 3 copies of, or just 3 copies, 1 copy of Loris, Lady of Lament. I am meant to run this at 3 originally, but then I realized like it's more of a late game card because you can target 3 or 6 normal traps that are banished or in your graveyard, place them to the bottom of the deck, and if you do, draw 1 card for every 3 cards that were placed. So kind of like a backwards pot of extravagance. But the whole thing is like, yeah, you have to like wait till you have at least 3 or 6 trap cards to even be in your grave or banish pile to even utilize it. So that's why I'm only opting to play 1 Loris. It is a great support card though, don't get me wrong. It is an excellent card to even have. But I think 1 is just fine, especially because it's searchable anyway. But here's how this card works too. If another monster is tributed, or if a normal trap is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, except during damage tip, you can target 1 normal trap in your graveyard, set it. So great way to also recycle your resources. Next, 3 copies of Arima. This basically gives you access to your Lair of Darkness simply just by discarding it. And also you can tribute 1 dark monster, and then draw a card. And if you tribute a dark monster other than this card to activate this effect, you can then add 1 dark monster with 2,000 or more or defense points from your deck to your hand. So great way to get one of our main boss monster, Darkest Diablosis. Simply because, yeah, he's just big. I like the fact that he can't be targeted and he cannot be tributed by your opponent, so your opponent can't even use a kaiju against it, so pretty nice. But it does have an effect where, like, if you tribute a dark monster, you can make your opponent place 1 card from their hand, and they'll either have to add it back to the top of their deck or the bottom of the deck, so whichever they decide to choose. So yeah, and if a dark monster you control is tributed, you can special summon this card from your hand or your graveyard. So pretty good way to bring itself back. Next, to round up our monsters, 3 copies of Tour Guide. Tour Guide's crazy because, like, I know some of y'all are gonna think like, wait, like, what happens if Tour Guide gets ashed or veilered or even impermed? Well, I'm not worried about it because the whole point of Tour Guide is that it's supposed to act as bait. And if it does, and if I do get to resolve it, then perfect. You know, I can still keep going. But Tour Guide, like, and we're gonna get to one of the cards why I think Tour Guide is so good. So yeah, like, yeah, it's vulnerable to like 3 different disruptions, but again, it doesn't matter. So long as you have the right follow-up plays, you should be able to pull off like pretty much what you need to, because the whole point of this board is just to set up your Lament monsters, just have them ready to tribute your opponent's monsters for cost and so on. So, but yeah, I'll get to more detail like why Tour Guide is kind of viable for this strategy. But anyway, moving on to spells. 3 copies of Lair of Darkness. Turns everything on the field into darks. And once per turn, you can tribute 1 of your opponent's dark monsters as in order to activate one of your effects. And it does have a mandatory end phase effect where depending on the opponent's turn, depending on the player's turn. For example, if I attributed monsters during my own turn, I get to special summon any number. I have to special summon as many tokens equal to the number of monsters that I attributed, and it's vice versa for the opponent's turn. So yeah, Lair of Darkness, pretty tight. Next, 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. I like to be given the choice of what I want to banish, so that's the whole reason behind it. Plus, I get to dig 6 cards deeper to whatever I may need, so that's the whole reason why I like to run it. Next, and this is why I feel like Tour Guide is such a good card, 3 copies of Ties of the Brethren. So like I said, if my opponent decides to negate Tour Guide, I can then, play Ties of the Brethren without no hassle. And funny enough, this card is not a hard once per turn. So like, if they do Ash it, this card says, well, let me get to what it does first. Pay 2,000 life points and target 1 level 4 or lower monster you control. For the rest of the turn after this card resolves, and those are the key words right there, you cannot special summon monsters. Also, special summon 2 monsters from your deck with the same type, attribute, and level as the monster you targeted, but with different names. So going back to what I was saying, like, if my opponent ashes this card, because it did not resolve, I am actually allowed to activate another one. So yeah, it's not a hard once per turn whatsoever, so long as, until it actually resolves. So yeah, Ties of the Brethren is actually pretty broken. And since I am running Lair of Darkness, got to play 3 copies of Super Poly. Super Poly with this card together is like, it's just broken because, again, you turn everything to dark, so you have plenty of targets for that. So, yeah. That pretty much rounds up our spells. Moving on to traps. Playing 3 copies of Imperm. It is technically a hand trap, so yeah, that's pretty good. 3 Dogmatic of Punishment. Easily the best trap in my entire deck, simply because, like, I don't typically touch my extra deck all too much unless I really have to, but most of everything I have in this extra deck is Dogmatic of Punishment targets. So it's just a good way to get some spot removal. And the fact that some of my extra deck monsters have utility in the graveyard, which we'll get to momentarily. 3 copies of Evenly. It was either going to be this or Torrential Tribute, and I opted for this simply because in case I lose the dice roll, at least I have a good, powerful going second card, because Evenly Matched is just like one of the best equalizers in the format. So yeah, Evenly Matched is just great. 2 back to the front, just a monster reborn for your monsters. Of course, they do have to come back in defense mode, but you can always just activate this during your opponent's end phase or whatever. 2 Metaverse, since, it is back at 3. I mean, Mystic Mind's no longer in the format, so I'm happy to see that. And 1 Trap Trick. I just don't like the restriction that Trap Trick has, so I just feel like 1 is enough. And plus, like, this plus either Back to the Front or Metaverse, you're kind of guaranteed to get one or the other, so yeah, that's the whole point behind it. Alright, so for the extra deck, starting off with links, 1 Dark, just a generic link 2 for dark monsters. 1 B-Cop, just to put the counter for protection. 5-headed Link Dragon. This is actually one of my Dogmatic of Punishment targets, because this just guarantees me to get over just about anything. And yeah, so forth. But anyway, moving on. The rest is going to be mostly punishment targets. So 2 copies of Wind Pegasus at Ignister. So you can banish this card from your grave and then target one card your opponent controls, shovel it back into the deck. 2 Mariologic Aggregator. Now, for those who don't know what the heck this is, this was actually in Darkwing Blast. But if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 face-up card on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn. So, like, you can send this off with Dogmatic of Punishment. Pop a card, as long as their attack points are equal or less. And then if your opponent has another monster with especially an effect monster, you can target it immediately after and basically just imperm it. So yeah, Mariologic Aggregator is pretty funny. 2 Fossil Warrior Skull Knight. You can banish this card from your grave and then target what monster your opponent controls and destroy it, basically. So yeah, kind of similar to Entis, but of course we are running 2 copies of Entis. Entis is just significantly better, but it's just good to have more options, For Super Poly targets, playing 2 copies of Starving Venom, 1 Trifeoviridium, and 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp. Sorry, I kind of rolled my tongue there. But yeah, I might cut 1 Starving Venom for a Dragus Depelia. It just depends, if I can make the room for it. But yeah, this is just what I came up with for right now. But anyway, that pretty much rounds up our extra deck. Now moving on for the side deck. Now the side deck is way different than what I normally would do for Lair of Darkness deck, but with the format we're in, I feel like I needed to really think about what do I really want to play on the side. So for sure, 3 copies of Lancia. This gets around other people's evenly matches. Funny enough, this is actually pretty strong against Dark Worlds, because like in case if you come across that matchup, they can't spam the field spell too much. But it's also pretty good against Cashier, because, you know, like, if they can't banish your stuff, then, you know, that puts you in a pretty good position. I am running a Bestial package on the side, just in case. It's just mostly for the right matchup, so like 1 Magnemite, 1 Druid Swarm, and 1 Baldrake, which, funny enough, these guys kind of do work well with the Lair Darkness package, simply because, you know, you can, if you, like, Baldrake does have a tributing effect, and also if Druid Swarm leaves the field, you get to send 1 other card your opponent controls to the grave, so, and it does target, but it does not destroy, so really nice. Another good blowout card, 3 copies of Regeki. 3 Book of Moon. Book of Moon's just pretty good. Between this and Book of Eclipse, I felt like Book of Moon was just slightly better because, like, yeah, Book of Eclipse, though, it is really good. My deck doesn't really, like, it. Not that it struggles, you know, getting rid of an entire board. It's just, like, sometimes I don't always have the right pieces. But if I just want to make sure I can get rid of, like, force out 1 disruption, or just, like, make sure my plays can go through, Book of Moon is actually a, like, pretty key card. And plus, it's just more interactive. And another reason is that Eclipse can be ashed, so in case if I don't open up with another one, then yeah, I kind of get stuck right there. So that's the whole reason why I decided to go with Book of Moon. And finally, 3 copies of D-Barrier. Pretty good against certain matchups. Against Branded, you know, you just call Fusion, they can't fuse. Against Cashier, call Xyz. Actually, same thing with Trap Tricks, you know, just call Xyz and they can't go into their Xyz, but they can still go into their Link monster, so just bear that in mind. And yeah, it's just like, again, depends on the matchup. Sword Soul calls Synchro, they can't Synchro Summon whatsoever. So yeah, D-Barrier, it's a pretty nasty card. But yeah, that's all I got. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll catch you guys again next time.